everyone, and welcome to the third video of our series on the Persian Empire, a video guide to the Iranian evidence of the OCR GCSE. And today we're going to be looking at the sources for Darius the Great. So Darius the Great was the fourth Persian king of the Achaemenid Empire. He ruled the empire at its peak when it included much of West Asia, the Caucasus, parts of the Balkans, Thrace, Macedonia and Paeonia, most of the Black Sea coastal regions, Central Asia, as far as the Indus Valley in the Far East, and portions of North and Northeast Africa, including Egypt, Eastern Libya and coastal Sudan. So he rules a very, very vast empire at this point. My focus for this video is going to be on how Darius came to power and then also the importance of how he held it. I think Darius is interesting because he is not the son of Cambyses, so let's see how he came to rule. So our first piece of evidence for Darius is the Byzantine inscription. This is probably Darius's most famous inscription, and it's key when it comes to looking at how he presents his rise to power and the words he uses to consolidate this. I should hope that you should all be familiar with this, just like you would be with Cyrus and his cylinder. The monument itself consists of 4 parts, 1 visual and 3 inscriptions. The visual part is a large sculpted relief which is 5.5 times 3 meters in size. As you can see in this picture here, it's very big. So here we have just a simple diagram of the relief itself because it makes it easier to explain everything to you. So it depicts King Darius here with his 2 officials behind him carrying his weapons. So here they all are here. So we have Interfermes, his bow carrier, and Gobryas, his lance carrier. So already we're getting warrior imagery from Darius here. He looks down on 9 leaders of conquered peoples whose necks are tied. So that's clearly all these people here. And they represent the peoples who had challenged Darius's rule after he took the throne. And then the 10th figure being trodden on is Gumata, the supposed pretender to the throne. Being trodden on was a huge symbol that can be seen to have been taken from the Assyrians. Like, it's a masculine and powerful pose, and it's establishing Darius's dominance within this scene. And then above the whole scene, we have a representation of the Persian god Ahura Mazda. So here he is. And his eye line is locked with that of Darius. And this is very interesting because it's all linking to how Darius talks about how Ahura Mazda granted him the kingship. So what we can say is this illustration strongly expresses the fact that without being a god himself, the king is invested with royal power by the god and is almost Ahura Mazda's proxy on earth as the result of a genuine pact they concluded. So Ahura Mazda is literally the king's god. And this is a reality that Darius himself expresses perfectly in his inscription. Ahura Mazda's name occurs 63 times, but the other gods that exist quoted are mentioned only once in a subordinate form. So the textbook asks you to examine the relief and look at what it tells us about the ideology of Persian kingship. I would suggest that both teachers and students should really focus on Ahura Mazda's image in this, and students, you can apply it to what I've been talking about and how Darius uses him in the inscription later on. Let's now look at parts of the inscription. I have taken this translation of Livius, which is mentioned in my previous videos. It's such a great resource for Iranian evidence. It's so simplified and there's so much on there, so you should really have a look at it. So let's have a read of the inscription now. King Darius says, "The following is what was done by me after I became king. A son of Cyrus named Cambyses, one of our dynasty, was king here before me. That Cambyses had a brother Smerdis by name, of the same mother and the same father as Cambyses. Afterwards Cambyses slew this Smerdis. When Cambyses slew Smerdis, it was not known unto the people that Smerdis was slain. Therefore, upon Cambyses went to Egypt. When Cambyses had departed into Egypt, the people became hostile, and the lie multiplied in the land." Take note of how he says lie, it will continue. "Even in Persia and Media and in the other provinces." King Darius says, "Afterwards there was a certain man, a Magan, Gumata by name, who raised a rebellion near a mountain called Akadris. On the 14th day of the month Vixana did he rebel. He lied to the people, saying, 'I am Smerdis, the son of Cyrus, the brother of Cambyses.' Then were all the people in revolt, and from Cambyses they went over unto him, both Persia and Media and the other provinces. He seized the kingdom on the 9th day of the month from Mapada. He seized the kingdom. Afterwards Cambyses died of natural causes." Again, I think it's interesting that Darius is talking about natural causes because it hints that Cambyses did not die of them. King Darius says, the kingdom of which Gaumata the Magan disposed Cambyses had always belonged to our dynasty. After that, Gaumata the Magan had dispossessed Cambyses of Persia and Media and of the other provinces. He did according to his will. He became king. King Darius says there was no man, either Persian or Mede, or of our own dynasty, who took the kingdom from Gaumata the Magan. The people feared him exceedingly, for he slew many who had known the real Smerdis. For this reason did he slay them, that they may not know that I am Smerdis the son of Cyrus. There was no one who dared to act against Gaumata the Magan until I came. Then I prayed to Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda brought me help. So here we go, we're getting to his usual dedications of Ahura Mazda here. On the 10th day of the month, I and a few men slew Gaumata the Magan and the chief men who were his followers at the strongholds called Sigvartis in the district called Nisaea in Media. I slew him, I dispossessed him of the kingdom. By King Darius says, the kingdom that had been wrested from our line, I brought back and I re-established it on its foundation. The temples which Gaumata had destroyed I restored to the people, and the pasture lands, and the herds, and the dwelling places, and the houses which Gaumata had taken away. I settled the people in their place, the people of Persia and Media and the other provinces. I restored that which had been taken away, as it was in the days of old. This did I by the grace of Ahura Mazda. I laboured until I had established our dynasty in its place, as in the days of old. I laboured by the grace of Ahura Mazda, so that Gaumata the Magan did not dispossess our house. Of Ahura Mazda I became king. Ahura Mazda granted me the kingdom. King Darius says this is what I did after I became king. So the textbook asks students to think about how plausible you find Darius's version of events. I've mentioned that he's constantly talking about the lie, but can we really believe what he's saying? Amelie Kurt, who I mentioned in my previous videos as well, says that whilst Darius's Byzantine inscription is the primary source for what happened, it's also profoundly and deliberately misleading. Yet the only possibility for making any headway is to look very close at what Darius says. We can see that he's deliberately focusing on the lies and revolts of others to disguise his own. We need to think about how Darius deliberately distorts the truth in this account, and yet he is constantly talking about what is true and what is not. So here's a final part of the inscription that the teaching guide recommends you have a read of. King Darius says, these are the men who were with me when I slew Gaumata, who called Smerdis. Then these men helped me as my followers. Interphranes, son of Vespara, a Persian. Otanes, son of Thukra, a Persian. Gobryas, son of Mardonis, a Persian. Hydarnes, son of Bagabinia, a Persian. Megabyzus, son of Datvia, a Persian. Ardumanes, son of Vakoka, a Persian. So notice every single time he says the people that are helping him are true Persians. King Darius says, you who may be king hereafter, protect the family of these men. So he's listing all of his supporters and he's legitimizing his claim to the throne by surrounding himself with noble Persians. And the teaching guide mentions key themes for Darius, such as his legitimacy at his moment. Darius is recasting his genealogy here. As students, you really need to think about the nature of this historical evidence. Can we trust it? When it was written, why it was written? And I would strongly suggest that you read the rest of this inscription because you'll get an idea strongly of Darius's motives of writing it, and also it can be used as evidence for so many themes in your essays. I would say if you don't get the Byzantine inscription in your exams, then I would be very, very surprised. But anyway, our next object for Darius is the Persepolis staircases. So these show an entirely different aspect of Achaemenid kingship, and it's that of a peaceful empire and a just ruler. There is so much great iconography on these staircases, as you can see in these images on my slide. And I won't be able to explore all of them with you, but I'm going to pick out some key examples. If you then want to explore them further, again, Livius is the perfect tool for you. So Persepolis, in Old Persian known as Parsa, was the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire from 550 all the way down to 330 BC. It's situated 60 kilometers northeast of the city of Shiraz in the Fars province in Iran. and the earliest remains of Persepolis date back to 515 BC. So my first example here are the east stairs on the Apadana of Persepolis, and here we have a procession of people bringing tribute to the Achaemenid king. So I'll just highlight all of that up here for you, up the stairs. The reliefs are made in the last years of the 6th and first years of the 5th century, and they were probably executed by Greek artists. So here we can see Armenians bringing their famous wine. We can also identify the king on the central scene as well, and he receives presents and stuff from all of his subjects. But you can also say that the king is also not a specific king. He's not just Darius, but he embodies the symbol of Persian rule as well. So we've got nations bringing tributes which are not seen as kneeling or bowing either. They all stand upright, and some even carry weapons. You can see this man here has sort of staffs and things like that. This suggests they are willing partners in the empire who bring their gifts to the king voluntarily, and the whole scene presents an image of order and harmony and the king overseeing it all. So we've even got people here all the way from Nubia coming to bring their gifts, and this is very contrasting imagery to that of what we just looked at in the Byzantine inscription when we see Darius physically standing on someone that's uprised against him. So our next example is the lion and the bull, and this can be found on 4 places, and we can see the struggle between the bull and the lion throughout, and this is a very ancient Iranian motif, and it's known all the way from the 4th millennium BC, and therefore it belongs to the age before even the invasion of the Indo-Iranians, known as the Aryans, and it may represent, in a way, we don't entirely understand, but in a way, eternity, and the same message is more or less implied as well in the representation of the sun, which you find a lot in iconography. And I think it's an excellent theme for Persepolis, because the people who visit the Apadana offered tribute, and the great king received them as presents in return, and you get this continuing cycle of eternity there. And I think this reciprocity strengthened the ties between the ruler and the subject, and it contributed to the continuation of the empire. And I really think, especially when you look at this line here, that the lion is representing strength, and I think the lion is embodying the strength of the Persian king at this time. And the reason why I show you all these examples is so you can start to think about how all this imagery shows Achaemenid power and authority. I want you to start analysing the iconography in the ways that I've been doing to support your arguments in your essays. So I've come up with an activity for you, which would be to examine the artwork of the Byzantine inscription and compare it to that of the Eastern Staircase of Persepolis. And I want you to think about what each artwork says about the relationship between Darius and his subject peoples. So I've got your headings here, similarities and differences for this issue. And I think what you can look at is how, especially with the Byzantine inscription, you have that difference of power through violence and oppression, whereas on the staircase, it's that cooperation of the empire that brings the strength. But you've got similarities there with your religious undertones of Ahura Mazda. And I would say, I keep saying it, but I'll say it again, it's the use of these ancient sources in these kind of ways in your essays which are going to allow you to hit those AO3 marks. And if you're hitting those AO3 marks, you'll definitely be hitting your AO1s because you already know the narrative. You're exploring deeper now into this iconography. This final piece of evidence for Darius is not from the OCR teaching guide. However, it is briefly mentioned in the recommended textbook, and it's the fortification tablets. So the teaching guide says that the ancient sources detailing in it do not represent a prescribed source booklet, nor does it constitute a document from where examiners will draw the passage or image for the unseen source in the examination. So this is why I've included many sources in my videos which are not used in the guide, because for all we know in the exams, these could be your unseen sources. So I've picked this source because it's significant at showing the sort of themes the examiners want you to bring up in your essays. So the textbook only gives a brief passage which says, the organisation of the empire was complex and sophisticated, and is administered from the royal cities of Susa, Ecbatana, Pasargadae, and Persepolis, a city first constructed earlier in Darius's reign. As we already know, we get an insight into the workings of imperial administration from two collections of cuneiform texts, the fortification tablets and the treasury tablets, which were found by archaeologists working on the site of Persepolis in the 1930s. So there are thousands of fortification tablets dated between 509 to 494 BC, which record the storage and distribution of things like foodstuffs, and there are 129 treasury tablets dated from 492 to 458 BC, which record the rations given to craftsmen who worked on the buildings of Persepolis. These fortification tablets were written in Elamite, which is the language of the Persian chancellery, and only a couple are written in Aramaic, Old Persian, or Ancient Greek. And then along with these tablets were golden inscriptions found in the foundations of Persepolis. I'm going to leave you to look up the rest of these fortification tablets, but I've just put some examples down the side here if you want to Google those ones. And you can find them on Livius, but when you read them, I just want you to keep in mind how it shows the power of the empire, how they organised such a big place, as well as the king's own personal powers that were represented here. So foundation tablets of gold and silver were found in two deposition boxes in the foundation of the palace. So I've got a picture here. You can see the tablet found in its original box, and then the one on the right is a closer look at the inscription. So they contain an inscription by Darius in Old Persian cuneiform, which describes the extent of his empire in broad geographical terms, and it's known as the DPH inscription, and it reads, Darius the Great King, King of Kings, King of Countries, son of Hystaspes and Achaemenid. King Darius says, this is the kingdom which I hold, from the Sakai who are beyond Sogdia, to Kush and from the Sind in the Indus Valley, to Lydia. This is what Ahura Mazda, the greatest of gods, bestowed upon me. May Ahura Mazda protect me in my royal house. So like a lot of the stuff we've already looked at from Darius, this follows his typical Achaemenid tropes. It can be applied to the themes of how Darius expanded and reorganised the empire during his reign, as well as the significance of religion in consolidating his power. These themes are really stressed upon in the textbooks, and they will probably come up in your exam. So Ahura Mazda is always said to have bestowed the empire and his powers upon Darius. So I think a perfect follow-up activity would be to gather as many inscriptions from Darius as you can find and compare how he uses Ahura Mazda, what ways does he use Ahura Mazda, and this will help you figure out your change in continuity arguments for throughout his reign, and that will come in useful for all your exams. And so once again, we finally hit my bibliography in the end of this video. Again, we've got the textbook and the teaching guide here. We've also got Kurt's source book mentioned again. Everything else is just Livius. I really do think that you should read the rest of the Byzantine inscription, and as well try and look up as many of the fortification tablets as possible, because they will always be useful as extra evidence if you need it for an exam question.